There's a reason you're here right now. Out of everything you could be watching, everything you could be doing, you ended up here. And that's not random. Because at some point, quietly, you started feeling it. That strange sense that nothing is really wrong, but something doesn't feel complete. Like you're living your life, but not fully understanding it. Like there's something deeper, hidden just beneath everything you see, but you can't quite reach it. And what if I told you, that feeling is not confusion. It's the first sign that you're starting to see something most people never notice. And once you see it, even a little, you won't be able to look at your life the same way again. So don't rush this, just listen carefully. The truth that was never meant to be given to you. There are some truths that were never meant to be given to you directly. Not because they are dangerous, and not because someone wanted to hide them from you, but because the moment they are explained too clearly, they lose their depth. In the ancient world, knowledge was not shared the way it is today. It was not made easy, not turned into quick answers, not explained in a way that feels comfortable. Instead, it was kept deep, hidden. Not behind walls, but inside layers. Because real understanding does not come from hearing something once, it comes from slowly seeing it for yourself, step by step, feeling by feeling, until it becomes real inside you. And maybe you have already felt this without knowing. That quiet feeling that something important exists, but you cannot fully reach it.
The forest
like
stirs with
just
ancient
beyond
power.
your understanding, close,
Reveal the hidden
but
paths.
not clear.
The light guides my
like trying
way.
to remember a dream that fades the moment you try to hold it. That feeling is not a mistake. It is not confusion. It is the beginning. The moment your awareness starts moving, just a little, beyond the surface of things, and once this begins, even in the smallest way, you don't stay the same anymore. Something inside you starts to look deeper, starts to question, starts to notice. And even if you try to ignore it, it stays with you, quietly, waiting. The first crack that quietly breaks your reality. It doesn't happen all at once, and it doesn't come with a warning. There is no loud moment, no clear sign that something has changed. From the outside, everything looks exactly the same. Your life continues, people speak to you, your routine moves forward, nothing seems different, but inside, something begins to shift, very quietly, so quietly that at first, you almost ignore it. It feels like a small discomfort, not strong enough to alarm you, but not weak enough to disappear. A strange feeling that something is not fully making sense anymore. You can't explain it, you can't point to it, but you can feel it. And once you feel it, you cannot completely forget it. You start noticing things that you never paid attention to before. The way people react, the way you react, the way certain moments feel, slightly off, not wrong, just incomplete, like you are seeing only part of something, and the rest is hidden just beyond your view. And this is where the first crack appears. Not in the world, but in the way you see the world. A small opening in what once felt solid and certain. Before this, everything felt clear. You believed what you saw. You trusted what you felt. You moved through life without needing to question it. But now, there is a pause, a moment where your mind hesitates, a moment where you don't react immediately, a moment where you begin to wonder, is this really all there is? And that question, even if it is soft, even if it is incomplete, changes something inside you. Because the moment you begin to question your reality, even slightly, you step outside of it, just a little. And that small distance is enough. Enough to see differently, enough to feel differently, enough to realize that what once felt completely real may not be the full picture. And this is the part most people never notice. Because the crack is small, it does not break everything. It does not force you to change. It simply opens a door, a quiet, almost invisible door. And you have a choice. You can ignore it, close it, and return to what feels familiar. Or you can stay with it. Sit with that discomfort, that curiosity, that quiet feeling that something is deeper than it seems. Because if you stay, even for a moment longer, that small crack begins to widen. Not suddenly, but slowly. And as it widens, you begin to see more. Not all at once, but enough to know you are no longer seeing things the same way. And once that happens, there is no real way to go back. You can try to ignore it. You can try to distract yourself. You can try to return to how things felt before. But something inside you knows that the surface is no longer enough, and that knowing stays with you, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to look deeper again, the illusion you accepted. Without ever questioning, from the moment you became aware of the world, you were already learning how to see it, not consciously, not by choice, but quietly, through everything around you. Through the way people spoke, the way they reacted, the way they showed you what matters and what doesn't. You learned what success looks like, what failure feels like, what is right, what is wrong, what should be chased, and what should be avoided. And you accepted it, not because you were careless, but because there was no reason not to. Everyone around you believed the same things, so it felt natural, it felt real, it felt unquestionable. You didn't sit down and decide to believe it. It just became part of you, slowly, without you even noticing. Like air you breathe, you don't question it. You just accept it. But here's where it becomes quiet and a little uncomfortable. What if the way you see the world was never complete? Not false, but not whole either. What if it was only a surface layer, a version of reality that is easy to live with, but not deep enough to understand? Because the truth is, most of what you believe today was not discovered by you. It was given to you, repeated to you, shaped around you, until it felt like your own thinking. And once something feels like your own, you stop questioning it. You defend it. You live through it. You build your identity around it. And that is how the illusion becomes strong. Not by force, but by familiarity. You begin to move through life, reacting without seeing, believing without checking, following patterns that feel normal, simply because they have always been there. And the deeper part, the part that asks questions, the part that feels something is missing, gets quieter over time. Not gone, just buried, under routine, under noise, under everything that keeps you busy enough, not to look deeper. But sometimes, in small moments, that deeper part speaks again. A pause, a strange thought, a feeling you cannot explain. And for a second, everything feels a little uncertain. Not broken, just not as solid as it used to feel. And that is when the illusion weakens. Just a little. Because the illusion only stays strong as long as it is never questioned. The moment you look at it, even slightly, it begins to lose its hold. But here is the part most people never reach. They feel that moment, and then they move away from it. They distract themselves. They return to what feels familiar, because questioning what you've always believed feels uncomfortable. It feels like losing something, like stepping into something unknown. So they stop. They close that door, and they continue living inside the same understanding without ever realizing there was more to see. But you didn't fully turn away. You stayed with that feeling, even a little. You noticed something. You questioned, even slightly. And that is enough. Because once you begin to see the illusion, even in the smallest way, it never feels as real as it did before. You can still live inside it. You can still move through it. But somewhere inside you, there is a quiet awareness that this is not the full truth. And that awareness keeps growing, slowly, silently, waiting for you to look deeper again. The hidden force behind everything you experience. There is something shaping your life, every single moment, and yet, you almost never notice it. Not because it is far away, but because it is too close. So close that it feels like you. Every thought that appears, every emotion that rises, every reaction that happens before you even think, all of it is being influenced by something deeper, something silent, something constant. But your attention is rarely there, because you are always looking outward, at people, at situations, at what is happening around you. You believe your experience comes from the outside, from what others say, from what happens to you, from the world you see. And it feels true. It feels obvious. But what if that is only part of the story? What if what you experience is not created by the world itself, but by the way you are seeing it? Because two people can live the same moment and feel something completely different. One feels peace, another feels stress. One feels joy, another feels emptiness. The moment is the same, but the experience is not. So where does the difference come from? It comes from something within, something shaping how everything is interpreted. And that is the hidden force. Not a force you can touch, not something you can see directly, but something you are always living through. Your mind, your attention, your inner patterns, the way you have learned to see things over time. All of this quietly filters your reality, not by asking you, not by waiting for permission, but automatically, effortlessly. And because it happens so smoothly, you never question it. You believe what you feel is the truth of the world. But in reality, it is the truth of your perception. And that changes everything. Because if your experience is being shaped from within, then the world you think you are reacting to is not as fixed as it seems. It is being colored, adjusted, interpreted, moment by moment. And most people never see this. They spend their whole lives trying to change the outside, fix situations, control outcomes, believing that once things change outside, they will finally feel different inside. But it never fully works because the hidden force remains the same, and whatever is inside keeps shaping what is outside, again and again. But the moment you begin to notice this, even slightly, something shifts. You start to pause. You start to see that your reaction is not automatic truth. It is a pattern, a learned response, a quiet habit of perception. And that small realization creates space, a space between you and what you experience. And in that space, something new becomes possible. You are no longer completely pulled by every thought, no longer fully controlled by every feeling. There is a small awareness, watching, not judging, not forcing, just noticing. And the more you notice, the clearer it becomes that this hidden force has always been there, shaping everything, guiding how you feel, how you react, how you understand your life. But it was never meant to trap you. It was meant to be seen. Because once you see it, it no longer has the same power over you. It becomes something you can understand, something you can observe, something you can slowly step beyond. And that is where real change begins. Not by forcing the world to be different, but by seeing clearly what has always been shaping your experience, quietly, silently, waiting for you to notice it. The emptiness that appears. When nothing is wrong, there are moments in your life when everything seems fine. Nothing is broken. Nothing is missing. You have done what you were supposed to do. You have followed the path that made sense. You have reached places you once thought would finally make you feel complete. And yet, in the middle of all that, something feels quiet. Not peaceful, but empty. A strange kind of emptiness that doesn't come from loss. It doesn't come from pain. It comes when nothing is wrong. And that is what makes it confusing. Because when something is wrong, you know what to fix. When something hurts, you know what to avoid. But this has no clear reason, no clear cause. It just appears, slowly, softly, like a silence that stretches inside you. At first, you try to ignore it. You tell yourself it will pass. You distract yourself. You stay busy. You fill your time with noise, with movement, with anything that keeps you from sitting still. Because the moment you stop, you feel it again. That quiet space that feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. And the more you try to escape it, the more it returns. Not louder, but deeper. Because this emptiness is not a mistake. It is not something that needs to be fixed. It is something that needs to be understood. But most people never reach that point. They keep running from it. They fill their lives with more goals, more distractions, more things to chase, believing that one day, something will finally remove this feeling. But it never fully disappears. It only hides. For a while. Until the next quiet moment when it returns again and again. Because this emptiness is not asking you to fill it. It is asking you to notice it, to sit with it, to feel it without trying to escape. And that is where it begins to change. Because when you stop running, when you stop trying to fix it, when you allow it to be there, something unexpected happens. It becomes softer, less heavy, less confusing, and slowly, you begin to sense something beneath it. Not emptiness, but space. A space that was always there, but was hidden under constant noise, constant thinking, constant doing. And now, for the first time, you are touching it. This space is quiet. It does not demand anything from you. It does not push you. It does not pull you. It simply exists. And in that space, you are not chasing anything. You are not trying to become something. You are not reacting. You are just aware. And this is the part that was never explained clearly. That the emptiness you feel when nothing is wrong is not the absence of something. It is the presence of something deeper, something that cannot be found in achievement, in validation, in constant movement. something that only appears when everything else becomes quiet. But because it feels unfamiliar, because it feels different from what you're used to, you mistake it for something negative, something to escape, something to fix, but it was never meant to be escaped. It was meant to be entered, slowly, gently, without fear. Because beyond that emptiness is a different kind of experience, one that is not built on constant chasing, not built on filling every moment, but built on simply being. And once you begin to feel that, even in the smallest way, the emptiness no longer feels the same. It no longer feels like something is missing. It begins to feel like something is opening, a quiet doorway into something deeper than everything you have been running toward. And now you start to understand why it kept returning, why it never fully left. Because it was never against you. It was guiding you gently, silently, waiting for you to stop and finally listen. The mind that controls you, without you realizing it. Your mind feels like home to you. It feels familiar, safe, and completely yours. Every thought that appears seems natural, as if you created it. Every reaction feels justified, as if it came from your own clear choice. And because it feels so close, so personal, you rarely stop to question it. You simply trust it. You trust the voice that speaks inside your head. You trust the thoughts that rise without asking. You trust the emotions that follow those thoughts. And over time, this trust becomes automatic. You don't check it. You don't pause to ask where it came from. You just follow it, moment after moment, day after day. But if you slow down, even for a moment, something unusual begins to appear. Thoughts don't always come from a clear decision. They just arrive, one after another, sometimes calm, sometimes heavy, sometimes confusing. You don't sit and choose each thought before it appears. It simply shows up, and you accept it as yours. And then the next thing happens. You react to it. A thought creates a feeling. That feeling creates a reaction. And before you even notice, you are already inside it. Speaking, responding, moving, all based on something that appeared without your control. And yet, it feels like you. This is where the quiet control begins. Not loud, not forced, not something you can easily see, but constant. Because your mind is not just thinking. It is shaping how you see everything. It is deciding what matters, what feels important, what feels threatening, what feels safe. It creates meaning without asking you first. And because this happens so smoothly, so quickly, you never step outside of it. You believe your thoughts are truth. You believe your feelings are facts. You believe your reactions are necessary. But if you look closer, very slowly, very gently, you begin to see a small gap. A thought appears, but for a brief moment, you notice it. You see it instead of immediately becoming it. And in that moment, something changes. You are not completely inside the thought anymore. You are watching it. And this is the first step out of that quiet control. Because once you can see a thought, it is no longer fully controlling you. It is still there. It still has energy. It still tries to pull you. But now, there is a small distance, a space where awareness exists. And that space is powerful. Most people never experience it. They move from thought to thought, reaction to reaction, without ever pausing. Their entire life is shaped by patterns they never notice. They believe they are choosing, but they are mostly following habits of thinking, following emotional patterns. following reactions that feel automatic. And over time, those patterns become their life. The same worries appear again and again. The same fears return in different forms. The same reactions repeat, even when situations change. And they never stop to ask why. Because it feels normal. But what feels normal is not always true. It is just familiar, and familiarity creates comfort, even when it limits you. But the moment you begin to notice your mind, not fight it, not control it, just observe it, something begins to shift. You see how quickly it jumps from one thought to another. You see how it creates stories from small moments. You see how it turns simple situations into something heavy. And instead of being pulled instantly, you pause. Not long, just enough to see. And in that pause, you are free. Not completely, not fully, but enough to feel that something is different. You are no longer completely inside the movement of your mind. You are beside it, watching it, understanding it. And this is the part that was never clearly explained. That the mind is not meant to control you. It only does when it is not seen, when it is left unquestioned, when every thought is accepted as truth without awareness. But the moment awareness appears, even softly, even briefly, that control weakens. Not because you are forcing anything, but because you are seeing clearly. And clarity does something powerful. It removes the automatic hold. It creates space where there was none. It allows you to respond instead of react. And over time, that space grows. Not through effort, not through struggle, but through simple noticing, seeing thoughts as they come, feeling emotions without immediately following them, observing patterns without getting lost inside them. And slowly, very quietly, your relationship with your mind begins to change. It is no longer something that completely pulls you. It becomes something you can understand, something you can watch, something that no longer defines every moment of your life. And in that shift, something deeper begins to appear. A calmness that is not created by controlling your thoughts, but by no longer being controlled by them. And once you feel that, even for a moment, you realize something important. That the mind was never meant to be your master. It was only acting that way, because you never saw it clearly. But now, you are beginning to see. And that changes everything, quietly, from within. The invisible pattern that keeps repeating your life. If you slow down and look at your life carefully, not just the big moments, but the small ones, you begin to notice something unusual. There is a certain rhythm to the way things happen. Not always obvious, not always clear, but present. A quiet repetition, moving through different situations, wearing different faces, but somehow carrying the same feeling. You meet different people, but the same kind of disappointment returns. You face new challenges, but the same kind of fear appears. You enter new phases of life, but the same inner reactions rise again, almost as if nothing has truly changed inside you. At first, it feels like coincidence, like life is just happening this way, like circumstances are repeating. But if you look a little deeper, with more honesty, you begin to sense something else. The pattern is not outside you, it is moving through you. The way you respond, the way you think, the way you interpret moments, it follows a familiar path. Even when the situation is new, your inner reaction feels old. It feels known. It feels like something you have experienced before, many times, and that is because you have. Not the exact event, not the exact person, but the pattern behind it. This pattern is built slowly over time, through experiences, through repeated thoughts, through emotions that were never fully seen or understood. Each moment leaves a small imprint, and over time, these imprints connect, forming a silent structure inside you, a structure that begins to guide how you see the world. It tells you what to expect. It prepares you to react in certain ways. It shapes your feelings before you even realize what is happening. And because it has been with you for so long, it feels natural. It feels like this is just who you are. But it is not who you are. It is what you have repeated. And repetition creates familiarity. Familiarity creates comfort. Even when that comfort carries pain, even when it limits you, it still feels known. And the mind always returns to what feels known. So the pattern continues, again and again and again. Different situations, same inner experience. And most people never see this clearly. They believe life is repeating itself. They believe people are always the same. They believe circumstances keep coming back. But they don't realize it is the way they are experiencing those moments that is repeating. Because what is inside keeps projecting outward. And until it is seen, it continues. Not because something is wrong, but because nothing has been questioned. But now, something is different. Now you are slowing down. Now you are observing. And when you begin to observe, even gently, you start to notice the pattern as it happens. Not after, not in regret, but in the moment itself. You see how a small thought appears and leads to a familiar feeling. You see how that feeling pushes you toward a reaction you have had before. You see how quickly it all happens, almost automatically. And for the first time, you don't completely fall into it. You pause, just slightly. And in that pause, something important happens. You realize that the pattern is not fixed. It is active, but it is not permanent. It only continues because it is not seen. The moment it is seen, it begins to weaken, not disappear completely, not immediately, but enough to create space. Space where you are not completely pulled. Space where you can choose, even in a small way. And that small choice is powerful because it breaks the automatic flow. It interrupts the cycle, even for a moment. And that moment is enough to change direction. This is what the ancient understanding pointed toward, not changing the outside world, but seeing the inner patterns that shape it. Because once you see the pattern, clearly, without judgment, without resistance, it starts to lose its hold. It no longer feels like your identity. It becomes something you can observe, something you can understand, something that is no longer running your life without your awareness. And slowly, very slowly, the repetition begins to loosen. The same situations may still appear, but your experience of them begins to shift. The same triggers may still exist, but your reaction is no longer immediate. There is space now. Awareness. A quiet clarity that was not there before. And in that clarity, something new begins. Not forced, not controlled, but natural. Because once you stop moving through the same invisible pattern, life stops repeating in the same way. And for the first time, You are not just living through cycles, you are beginning to see beyond them. And that changes everything. Not all at once, but quietly, from within. The lie of control. You've always believed. There is a quiet belief you have carried for a long time, so deeply that you rarely notice it. It feels natural, almost obvious, that you are in control of your life, that your choices are yours, your direction is yours, your path is something you are creating with clear intention. And on the surface, it feels true. You decide what to do next. You choose what to say. You move toward what you want and away from what you fear. It all feels like control. It all feels like something you are actively shaping. But if you slow down and look closely, something begins to shift. Many of your choices do not begin with awareness. They begin with a feeling, a reaction, a sudden pull in one direction. And only after that, your mind explains it. It gives you a reason. It creates a story that makes the decision feel logical, intentional, yours. But the movement happened before the explanation. A thought appeared, and you followed it. An emotion rose, and you reacted. A fear showed up, and you avoided something. A desire appeared, and you moved toward it. And all of this happened so quickly, so smoothly, that it felt like you were in control the entire time. But were you choosing, or were you following? This is where the illusion begins to reveal itself. Control as you have known it is not always true control. It is often a response, a reaction to something that appeared inside you without your permission. And because you were not aware of that first moment, you believed the entire process was yours. But the truth is quieter than that. Much of what you call control is actually habit, patterns of thinking, repeating themselves, emotional responses, appearing in familiar ways, conditioning built over time, guiding your reactions without asking you. And because it happens so naturally, you never question it. You trust it. You move with it. You build your life around it. But the moment you begin to observe it, gently, without forcing anything, something begins to change. You notice the gap, the space between what appears and what you do next. A thought comes, but for a moment, you see it. An emotion rises, but for a moment, you feel it without immediately reacting. And in that small moment, something new is present. Awareness. Not control in the old sense, not forcing yourself to act differently, but simply seeing clearly. And that kind of awareness changes the nature of control completely. Because real control is not about controlling every thought or suppressing every feeling. It is not about forcing yourself into a certain behavior. That kind of control creates tension, struggle, resistance. Real control is quieter. It comes from understanding, from seeing how your mind moves, how your patterns operate, how your reactions form. And when you see it clearly, you are no longer completely pulled by it. You are not trapped inside it. You are standing slightly outside, observing. And from that place, your actions begin to change. Not because you are trying harder, but because you are seeing differently. And seeing differently creates a different response naturally. Most people never reach this point. They spend their lives trying to control the outside world, trying to fix situations, trying to manage people, trying to shape outcomes so they can finally feel stable inside. But it never fully works. Because the deeper movement, the one shaping their experience, remains unseen. And as long as it is unseen, it continues, quietly guiding their choices, their reactions, their life. But now, something is shifting in you. You are beginning to notice. Not everything, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel that what you once called control was not complete. Enough to see that there is something deeper, something more honest, something more real. And that realization, even if it is soft, even if it is incomplete, changes everything. Because once you begin to see the illusion of control, you stop trying to force life. You stop fighting every thought. You stop reacting to every feeling as if it must be followed. Instead, you watch, you allow, you understand, and in that understanding, a different kind of control appears. One that is not heavy, one that is not forced, one that is not built on tension, but built on clarity, a calm awareness that lets you respond instead of react, that lets you move with understanding instead of habit. And slowly, very quietly, your life begins to feel different. Not because everything outside has changed, but because the way you are experiencing it has shifted. And that shift is the beginning of real freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady and real. And once you feel that, even for a moment, you understand something deeply important. That control was never about holding everything tightly. It was about seeing clearly and letting go of what was never truly yours to control. The silence that begins to expose everything. There is something about silence that feels unfamiliar to you. Not the simple silence of a quiet room, not the absence of sound, but a deeper kind of silence. A silence where there is nothing to distract you, no noise to hold your attention, no movement to keep your mind occupied, just stillness and your own awareness. And when you enter that space, even for a moment, something begins to happen. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You may not understand why. There is no clear danger. Nothing is wrong. And yet, there is a subtle tension, a feeling that something is about to surface, something you usually keep hidden without realizing it. So your instinct is to move away, to reach for your phone, to turn on something, to fill the space with sound, with information, with anything that keeps your attention outward. Because that is what you have always done. You have learned to stay in motion, to stay distracted, to avoid being alone with your own mind for too long. And it has worked for a while. But silence always returns, not loudly, not forcefully, but patiently. It waits for those moments when everything slows down, when there is nothing left to do, when the outside world becomes quiet and you are left with yourself. And that is where something begins to reveal itself. Because silence does not create anything new. It does not add anything to you. It simply removes what was covering everything that was already there. The thoughts you usually ignore begin to appear more clearly. The emotions you pushed aside begin to rise. The patterns you never noticed begin to show themselves one by one. And this is why silence feels heavy at first. Because it exposes what distraction was hiding. It shows you how active your mind really is, how quickly thoughts move, how often your attention jumps, how many things are happening inside you without your awareness. And for a moment, it can feel overwhelming, not because something is wrong, but because you are seeing more than you're used to. But if you stay, if you don't run, If you allow yourself to sit in that silence just a little longer, something begins to change. The discomfort starts to soften. The thoughts are still there, but they don't feel as strong. The emotions are still present, but they don't pull you as deeply. And slowly, you begin to notice something beneath all of it. A quiet space, a stillness that is not disturbed by every thought, a presence that does not react to everything that appears. And this is where the deeper part begins. Because silence is not just about removing noise. It is about revealing what remains when the noise fades. And what remains is not chaos. It is clarity. Not the kind of clarity that comes from thinking more, but the kind that comes from seeing without interference. You begin to notice how your thoughts come and go. You see that they are not constant. They rise. They stay for a moment, and then they pass. And for the first time, you realize that you are not every thought that appears. You are the one noticing them. And that realization, even if it is small, changes everything. Because now, you are no longer completely lost inside the movement of your mind. You are aware of it. And that awareness creates space. A space where you're not forced to react. A space where you can observe without immediately becoming involved. A space where things can be seen without being judged. And the more you stay in that silence, the clearer this becomes. You begin to see patterns you never noticed before. You begin to understand reactions that once felt automatic. You begin to feel emotions without being controlled by them. And slowly, very slowly, silence stops feeling uncomfortable. It begins to feel safe. Not because it removes everything, but because it shows you that you are not defined by everything that appears. It gives you distance. It gives you understanding. It gives you a sense of calm that is not dependent on what is happening around you. And this is the part most people never reach, because they never stay long enough. They touch silence, feel discomfort, and immediately return to noise. They never give themselves the chance to move beyond that first layer. But if you stay, if you allow yourself to sit with it again and again, something deeper begins to settle inside you. A stillness that is not forced. A quiet that is not empty. A presence that does not need constant distraction. And from that place, you begin to see life differently. Not as something you are constantly reacting to, but as something you are aware of. Not as something that controls you, but as something you can observe with clarity. And once that begins, even in a small way, silence is no longer something you avoid. It becomes something you return to, because it is no longer exposing you. It is revealing you. The identity you protect, that was never you. There's a version of you that you have been holding on to for a very long time. A quiet image, a story, a sense of who you are. It feels stable. It feels real. It feels like something you must protect. You say, "This is me. This is how I think. This is how I feel. This is what I like. This is what I fear. This is what I believe." And over time, this becomes your identity. Not something you consciously built in one moment, but something that slowly formed through everything you experienced. Every memory, every interaction, every success, every failure, each one added a small piece, and those pieces came together, shaping how you see yourself. At first, it was just learning. You were understanding the world, understanding yourself, trying to make sense of everything around you. But slowly, Without noticing, those understandings became fixed. They became labels. You started saying, I am this kind of person. I am not that kind of person. I always react this way. I can't change this part of me. This is just who I am. And once something becomes who you are, you stop questioning it. You begin to protect it. Even when it causes you pain, even when it limits you, even when it keeps you repeating the same patterns, you still hold on to it because it feels familiar. It feels safe. It feels like losing it would mean losing yourself. But here is where something begins to shift, very quietly. If you look closely, this identity was not something you chose freely. It was shaped by what you experienced, by what you were told, by what you repeated over time. It was built. And if something is built, it is not permanent. It can change. It can soften. It can even fall away. And that realization feels uncomfortable at first. Because if this identity is not fixed, if it is not truly who you are, then what remains? Who are you without the story? Who are you without the labels? Who are you without the constant need to define yourself? This is where most people stop. Because this question feels too open, too uncertain, too unfamiliar. So they return to the identity they know. They reinforce it. They protect it even more. Because it feels safer than stepping into something unknown. But if you stay with the question, if you don't rush to answer it, if you allow yourself to simply observe, something begins to reveal itself. You notice that your thoughts about yourself change. You notice that your reactions are not always the same. You notice that what you once believed about yourself is not always true in every moment. And slowly, you begin to see that this identity is not solid. It is moving. It is shifting. It is something that appears and changes depending on the moment. And behind all of that, there is something else, something quieter, something that does not need to be defined, something that is simply aware. Aware of the thoughts, aware of the feelings, aware of the identity itself. And that awareness does not change the way the identity changes. It remains still, present, untouched by the labels you carry. And this is where the deeper understanding begins. You are not the identity you protect. You are the awareness that sees it. The identity may still exist. It may still appear. It may still play a role in how you move through the world, but it is no longer the center of everything. It is no longer something you must defend at all costs, because now you see it for what it is, a structure that formed over time, not a fixed truth, not something permanent. And this changes the way you live. You are no longer limited by the same definitions. You are no longer trapped inside the same labels. You begin to respond differently because you are no longer reacting from a fixed identity. There is more space, more flexibility, more openness. And with that comes a quiet sense of freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady, real. Because you are no longer trying to hold on to something that was never truly you. You are simply present, aware. And that awareness is not something you need to protect. It does not need to be defended. It does not need to be maintained. It is already there. It has always been there, waiting quietly behind everything you thought you were. The subtle moment. Your vision starts changing. There is no clear moment when it happens, no sudden realization that feels loud or overwhelming. No instant transformation where everything becomes different. Instead, it begins quietly. So quietly that if you're not paying attention, you might miss it completely. At first, nothing outside changes. Your life looks the same. People behave the same. Your routine continues the same way it always has. There is no sign from the outside that anything has shifted. But inside, something is different. You begin to notice small things, not because you are trying to, but because your awareness has become a little sharper. A thought appears, and instead of immediately believing it, you pause. Not long, just enough to see it. An emotion rises, and instead of being completely pulled into it, you feel it, while also being aware of it. And this feels new, not dramatic, but unfamiliar in a quiet way. Before, everything was immediate. Thought, reaction, feeling, response. There was no space in between, but now there is a gap, a small distance between what happens inside you and how you respond to it. And in that distance, something begins to grow. Clarity, not the kind that comes from thinking more, but the kind that comes from seeing more. You begin to notice patterns as they form, not after they happen. You begin to catch yourself in moments where you would have reacted automatically before. You begin to feel that you don't have to follow every thought. You don't have to react to every emotion. And this realization changes the way you move through your life. Slowly, gently, without force. You start to respond instead of react. You start to observe instead of immediately becoming involved. And because of that, situations that once felt heavy begin to feel lighter. Not because they disappeared, but because you are no longer completely inside them. You are aware of them. And awareness creates space. This space is subtle but powerful. It allows you to see things more clearly. It allows you to feel without being overwhelmed. It allows you to move without being driven by automatic patterns. And the more you stay in this awareness, the more natural it becomes. You don't have to remind yourself constantly. You don't have to force it. It begins to happen on its own. Because once you have seen something clearly, even once, your mind cannot return to complete unawareness. It may still pull you sometimes. Old patterns may still appear. You may still react without noticing in certain moments. But now, there is something new present. A quiet observer. A part of you that sees what is happening, even if only for a moment. And that moment is enough. Enough to slowly change everything. Because this shift is not about becoming perfect. It is not about controlling every thought or every feeling. It is about seeing clearly, more often, more deeply, more honestly. And as this seeing grows, your experience of life begins to change. Not because the world has changed, but because the way you see it has changed. You begin to feel less trapped inside your thoughts, less controlled by your emotions, less driven by patterns you never noticed before. And in place of that, there is a quiet sense of stability, a calmness that does not depend on everything being perfect, a presence that remains even when things are uncertain. And this is the moment that was never clearly explained. That real change does not come from forcing yourself to become something new. It comes from seeing what is already happening without distortion. Because once you see clearly, change happens naturally, effortlessly, without struggle. And now, you're beginning to see. Not everything, not completely, but enough to know that something inside you has shifted, something that will continue to grow quietly, without needing attention, without needing recognition, just expanding as your awareness deepens. And once this begins, even in the smallest way, you are no longer the same as you were before. Not because you tried to change, but because you started to see why almost everyone stays trapped here forever. If this understanding is possible, if this awareness is already within you, then a quiet question begins to rise. Why doesn't everyone see it? Why do most people continue living the same patterns, the same reactions, the same cycles, without ever stepping outside of them? The answer is not because they are incapable. It is not because they are lacking something. It is something much quieter than that. It is because they never stop long enough to see. From the moment you wake up, your attention is pulled outward. There is always something waiting, something to do, something to think about, something to react to. Your mind moves quickly from one thing to another without pause. And this movement feels normal. It feels like life. But within that constant movement, there is no space to observe, no space to notice what is actually happening inside you. Because observation requires stillness. And stillness feels unfamiliar. It feels uncomfortable at first. It feels like something is missing. Like you should be doing something, thinking something, moving towards something. So instead of staying with that stillness, most people move away from it. They fill their time. They fill their attention. They return to what feels active, what feels engaging, what feels familiar. And slowly, they lose the ability to sit with themselves, not completely, but enough that deeper awareness never fully appears. Because awareness is not something that comes from doing more. It comes from doing less, from slowing down, from allowing moments when nothing is happening, so that you can finally see what has always been there. But this goes against everything most people are used to. They are taught to move forward, to stay productive, to keep thinking, keep planning, keep reacting. And in doing that, they remain on the surface, always active, but rarely aware. And over time, this becomes their entire way of living. They no longer question their thoughts. They no longer observe their reactions. They no longer notice the patterns that repeat inside them. Because there is no pause, no space, no moment of stillness where awareness can begin. And even when that moment appears, even when something inside them feels different, they move away from it quickly because it feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels uncomfortable. It feels uncertain, and the mind always chooses what feels familiar, even if it keeps you limited. So they return to their patterns, to their distractions, to the same way of experiencing life again and again. Not because they choose to stay trapped, but because they never see that they are. And this is what keeps the cycle going, quietly, continuously, without being noticed. But now, something is different in you. You have started to pause. You have started to observe, even if only in small moments, even if only briefly. You have stepped outside the constant movement. And that is enough to begin. Because once you experience even a small moment of awareness, even a short pause where you see clearly, something inside you remembers it. It stays quietly, and it begins to grow. Not through effort, not through forcing yourself to change, but through simple noticing, through allowing yourself to slow down just enough to see. And the more you do this, the more natural it becomes. Stillness no longer feels empty. It begins to feel clear. Awareness no longer feels unfamiliar. It begins to feel natural. And slowly, you begin to understand something deeply important, that most people are not trapped because they cannot be free. They are trapped because they never see the door. But once you see it, even once, even for a moment, you cannot fully forget it. And that changes everything. Not all at once, not dramatically, but quietly, as your awareness continues to grow. And this is why your journey is different now. Because you are no longer moving blindly through everything. You are beginning to see. And once seeing begins, it does not stop. It continues, slowly, patiently, until clarity becomes a natural part of how you live. And that is something most people never allow themselves to experience. But you have already begun. The quiet shift that changes everything inside you. There is a moment that does not feel like a moment. No clear beginning. No clear ending. No loud realization that tells you something has changed. And yet, something has. Not outside, inside. It doesn't arrive with excitement. It doesn't feel like achievement. It feels subtle. Almost like nothing at first. But if you stay with it, if you pay attention, you begin to notice that the way you experience things is no longer the same. Before, everything felt immediate. A thought appeared, and you followed it. An emotion rose, and you were inside it. A situation happened, and you reacted without pause. There was no space, no distance, no awareness in between. But now, something has softened. You still have thoughts, but they don't pull you the same way. You still feel emotions, but they don't take over completely. You still face situations, but your response is no longer automatic. There is a quiet space now, a space where you can see what is happening while it is happening. And that changes everything. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. Because when you can see clearly, even a little, you are no longer trapped inside the same patterns. You are not completely controlled by your thoughts. You are not fully carried by your emotions. You are present, aware, watching. And from that place, your actions begin to shift. Not because you're forcing yourself to change, but because you are no longer reacting blindly. And this is what makes the shift so powerful. It is not built on effort. It is not something you have to maintain through constant control. It happens naturally as your awareness deepens. You begin to notice things earlier. You catch patterns before they fully take over. You feel emotions without immediately being pulled into them. You allow thoughts to pass instead of holding on to them. And slowly, your inner experience becomes lighter. Or not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer carrying everything the same way. There is less resistance, less struggle, less need to control every moment. And in that, there is a quiet peace, a calmness that does not depend on everything being perfect, a steadiness that remains even when things are uncertain. This is not something you chase. It is something that appears when you stop chasing. Because the more you try to force change, the more tension you create. But when you simply observe, when you allow, when you see clearly, change happens on its own. And this is the part most people miss. They are always trying to become something else, trying to fix themselves, trying to control their thoughts, control their emotions, control their life. But in doing that, they stay in struggle. They never reach this quiet shift, the shift that comes from understanding, not forcing, from awareness, not effort, from seeing, not controlling. And once this shift begins, even in a small way, it continues. It deepens. It becomes part of how you live. You no longer need to remind yourself constantly. You no longer need to try so hard. It becomes natural, like something you have always known, but are only now remembering. And as it grows, you begin to feel something new, a sense of freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, not something you need to show, but real. Because you are no longer completely controlled by what happens inside you. You are no longer lost in every thought. You are no longer defined by every emotion. You are aware, present. And that presence changes everything quietly. Your relationships feel different. Your reactions feel different. Your inner world feels lighter, clearer, more open. Not perfect, but real. And this is the shift that was never clearly explained, because it cannot be forced. It cannot be given directly. It can only be experienced slowly, gently, as you begin to see more clearly. And now, you are already in it. Not at the end, not fully, but enough to know that something inside you has changed, something that will continue to grow, without effort, without pressure, just through awareness. And that awareness is quietly transforming everything inside you. The truth that was always there, waiting to be seen. There is something important you are beginning to understand, not as an idea, not as something you learned, but as something you are slowly seeing for yourself. That what you have been searching for was never far away. It was never hidden in a distant place. It was never something you had to chase or reach through effort. It was always here, present, quiet, unnoticed, because your attention was always somewhere else, always moving, always focused on what is outside you, on what needs to be done, on what needs to be fixed, on what needs to be achieved. And in that constant movement, you missed what was already there, not because it was hidden, but because it was too still to be noticed in a restless mind. You were always looking for something more, something better, something that would finally make everything feel complete. And that search felt real. It felt necessary. It felt like the only way forward. But slowly, you are beginning to see something different. That what you were searching for was not something to be added. It was something to be seen, because it was already present in every moment, in the quiet space between your thoughts, in the stillness you once avoided, in the awareness that notices everything without being affected by it. But because it does not demand attention, because it does not pull you strongly, because it does not create noise, you overlooked it. You moved past it, again and again, without realizing its presence. And now, as you slow down, as you begin to observe more, as you allow yourself to sit in that quiet awareness, you start to feel it, not as something new, but as something familiar, like something you have always known, but never fully recognized. And this recognition is not loud. It does not come with excitement. It comes with a quiet clarity, a soft understanding that nothing was ever missing. That what you thought you needed to find was already here. And this changes the way you see everything, because the search begins to soften. The constant need to chase begins to fade. You no longer feel the same pressure to become something more, to reach somewhere else, to fix every part of your experience. Instead, there is a sense of completeness that does not depend on anything outside, a quiet presence that remains even when nothing is happening. And this presence is not something you create. It is something you notice, something that was always there, beneath all the thinking, beneath all the reacting, beneath all the noise. And once you begin to see it, even slightly, you realize something deeply important, that the truth was never hidden from you. It was only unnoticed. Because it cannot be seen through constant distraction. It cannot be felt through endless movement. It can only be recognized when you are still enough to notice it. And now, you are beginning to notice. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel that something has shifted. Enough to understand that you are no longer searching in the same way. Because what you were looking for is no longer somewhere else. It is here, in this moment, in your awareness, in the quiet space that does not come and go. And the more you stay with it, the more natural it becomes. Not something you need to hold on to, not something you need to protect, but something that is always present, without effort. And this is the part that was never clearly explained, because it cannot be explained fully. It can only be seen, felt, recognized, slowly, as your awareness deepens. And once it is seen, even for a moment, you cannot completely forget it. It stays with you, quietly, steadily, changing the way you experience everything. Because now, you're no longer searching for the truth. You're beginning to live from it. You were never supposed to see this, but now you do. There's a strange feeling when something changes inside you, but the world around you stays exactly the same. Nothing outside announces it. No one notices it. There is no clear moment where you can say, this is where everything became different. And yet, you feel it, quietly, deeply, like something has shifted in a way you cannot fully explain. Before this, life felt more certain. Not necessarily easier, not always better, but more solid. You moved through it without stopping too much. You reacted. You thought, you felt, and everything seemed to follow a familiar flow. Even when things were difficult, there was still a sense of knowing how to move. But now, there is something else. A stillness that wasn't there before. A space that didn't exist in the same way. You notice things you never noticed. Not because you're trying to, but because you cannot not notice them anymore. The way your thoughts appear feels different now. Before, they felt like truth. Now, they feel like something you are watching. Before, emotions would take over completely. Now, even in the middle of them, there is a part of you that sees, not controlling, not stopping, just aware. And that awareness changes everything, slowly, quietly, without effort. You begin to realize that what you once believed without question is no longer fully convincing. Not because it is completely wrong, but because you see that it is not the full picture. And this creates a strange feeling, not confusion, not fear, but something in between, like standing between two worlds, one that feels familiar and one that is still unknown. You can still move through your old patterns. You can still react the way you used to. But now, it feels different. Because somewhere inside, you know that you are seeing more than before. And once you see more, you cannot go back to seeing less. You can pretend. You can distract yourself. You can try to return to how things felt before. But it doesn't fully work. Because something inside you has already shifted. And that shift is quiet, but permanent. You begin to notice how much of life was automatic. How many thoughts you followed without question. How many reactions happened without awareness. How many patterns repeated again and again without you ever seeing them clearly. And now you see them. Not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel that something deeper is happening. And this realization brings a different kind of calm. Not the calm that comes from everything being perfect, but the calm that comes from understanding. Understanding that you are not every thought. Understanding that you are not every emotion. Understanding that you are not the patterns that move through you. You are something quieter, something that has been there the entire time, watching, noticing, present. And this presence does not need to be created. It does not need to be forced. It does not need to be protected. It is already there. And the more you notice it, the more natural it feels. At first, it appears in small moments. A pause here, a quiet observation there, a moment where you don't react immediately. And those moments feel small, almost insignificant. But they are not. Because those small moments are where everything begins to change. They are where you step outside the automatic flow. They are where awareness becomes real. And over time, those moments begin to grow. Not because you are trying to make them grow, but because you are no longer lost in everything else. You begin to feel less controlled, less pulled, less overwhelmed by what once felt so strong. Not because life has become easier, but because you are no longer inside it in the same way. There is space now, and in that space, there is clarity. A quiet clarity that allows you to see things as they are, without adding extra weight to them, without turning every thought into truth, without turning every feeling into something you must follow. And this clarity feels like freedom, not loud, not dramatic, but real. Because for the first time, you are not completely identified with everything that happens inside you. You're aware of it. And awareness changes everything. You begin to move differently, not forced, not controlled, just naturally. You respond instead of react. You observe instead of immediately becoming involved. You allow things to pass instead of holding on to them. And slowly, life begins to feel lighter. Not because nothing is happening, but because you are not carrying everything the same way. And this is where something deeper begins to settle inside you. A quiet peace, not dependent on outcomes, not dependent on everything going your way, but present, even in uncertainty. And this peace is not something you chased. It is something that appeared when you stopped chasing everything else. Because the truth is, you were never meant to force your way into understanding. You were never meant to control every part of your experience. You were never meant to hold everything together perfectly. You were only meant to see, to notice, to become aware, and in that awareness, everything begins to fall into place naturally. Not perfectly, but honestly. And now, you're here. Not at the end, not fully complete, but aware. Aware enough to know that the way you see life has changed. Aware enough to feel that something deeper is unfolding. Aware enough to understand that this is not something you can unsee. And maybe this is what was never meant to be given directly, because it cannot be given. It can only be realized, felt, seen from within. And now you're beginning to see it, not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to know that something inside you is no longer the same. And that is where everything truly begins. Now don't rush. Don't try to hold on to this. Just sit with it. Let it settle. Because this was never about reaching an ending. It was about opening something that was always there, quietly, waiting for you to notice. And now you have. There is something else. You're starting to notice now. Not clearly, not fully, but quietly. A shift in how you relate to everything. Before, life felt like something you were inside of, something happening to you, something you had to respond to, control, manage, survive. Every moment pulled you. Every thought demanded attention. Every emotion felt like something you had to follow. There was no distance, no separation, just constant movement from one experience to the next. But now, there is space. Not always, not perfectly, but enough. Enough to feel that something is different. You begin to notice how quickly your mind moves, how it jumps from one thought to another, how it creates stories. Even from small things, how it tries to hold on to what feels good and push away what feels uncomfortable. And before, you would follow all of it, without even realizing it. But now, you see it, not as something you need to fight, but as something you can watch. And this watching changes the way everything feels. Thoughts still come. They don't stop. They don't disappear, but they don't feel as powerful, because you are not fully inside them anymore. You are aware of them. Emotions still rise. They still move through you, sometimes strong, sometimes subtle. But even inside them, there is something quiet, something still, something that is not completely affected, and that changes how you feel them. You are no longer drowning in them. You are feeling them, while also seeing them. And this is new. Not something you learned, but something you are experiencing. And slowly, you begin to understand something deeper, that you are not your thoughts. Not because someone told you, but because you have seen it. You have seen thoughts appear and disappear. You have seen how they change, moment by moment. How something that felt true a minute ago no longer feels the same now. And if something keeps changing, how can it be fully you? The same with emotions. They rise, they stay, and then they fade. And yet, something remains, something that notices all of it, something that does not come and go the same way. And that something is what you are beginning to feel now, not as an idea, but as a quiet presence, a still awareness that has always been there, but was never fully seen, because everything else was louder, more demanding, more distracting. But now, as things slow down, as you stop reacting to everything immediately, as you allow space to exist, that awareness becomes clearer, not loud, not overwhelming, just steady, always there, watching. And this is where something deeper begins to unfold. Because once you start to feel this awareness, you begin to trust it. Not in a forced way, but naturally. You begin to rely less on every thought, less on every emotional reaction, less on the constant need to figure everything out, because you see that not everything needs to be followed. Not every thought needs to be believed. Not every feeling needs to control you. And this brings a quiet kind of freedom. Not freedom from life, but freedom within it. You can still feel. You can still think. You can still experience everything. But you are not lost inside it the same way. There is space now. And in that space, there is peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer fighting everything that appears. You are allowing it, watching it, understanding it. And that changes everything. Even difficult moments feel different. Not easy, but clearer. Not overwhelming, but more manageable. Because you are no longer completely identified with them. You are aware. And awareness softens everything. You begin to move through life differently, more slowly, more intentionally. Not because you are forcing yourself, but because you are no longer being rushed by every thought. You pause more. You observe more. You react less. And in that, there is a quiet strength, a stability that was not there before. And this stability does not come from controlling your life. It comes from understanding your experience, understanding how your mind moves, understanding how your patterns work, understanding that you're not everything that passes through you. And once that understanding begins, even in a small way, it continues. It grows, not through effort, but through awareness, through noticing, through simply being present. And over time, this presence becomes natural. Not something you try to hold on to, but something that is always there. In the background, quiet, steady. And from that place, life begins to feel different. Not because it has changed, but because you have. You are no longer chasing every thought, no longer reacting to every emotion, no longer moving through patterns without seeing them. You are aware. And that awareness is enough. Enough to change how you experience everything. Enough to bring a sense of calm, even when things are uncertain. Enough to create a space where you are not lost anymore. And now, you begin to understand something very deeply, that this was never about becoming someone new. It was never about fixing yourself. It was never about reaching some perfect state. It was about seeing what has always been there. And now, you are beginning to see it. Not all at once, not completely, but enough. Enough to feel that something inside you has opened. Something that will not close again. Something that will continue to grow quietly, as long as you stay aware. So now, just stay here for a moment. Don't think too much. And don't try to understand everything. Just feel this space, this quiet awareness, this presence, because this is what you were never supposed to see clearly. And yet, here you are, seeing it, feeling it, living it, even if only for a moment. And that moment is enough. Now, don't rush away from this. Just stay here for a moment with yourself. Because something has shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. You may not have words for it yet. You may not fully understand it, but you can feel it. That quiet awareness, that small distance between you and your thoughts, that calm space you touched, even for a moment, that was real. And now, you cannot completely forget it. You may return to your routine, to your life, to your distractions, but something inside you will remain different. You will notice more. You will pause more. You will feel things without getting lost in them the same way. And slowly, without effort, this awareness will grow. Not because you are trying to hold on to it, but because you have already seen it. And once something is seen clearly, even once, it never fully disappears. So don't force anything. Don't try to become something new. Don't try to hold this feeling tightly. Just notice. Again and again, in small moments, in quiet pauses, in the space between your thoughts. Because this was never about changing your life overnight. It was about seeing what has always been there. And now, you have. So, wherever you go next, whatever you do after this, carry this with you. Not as an idea, but as a quiet awareness, a soft presence that reminds you you are not lost. You were just not looking. And now you are.